Welcome to a discussion on Gandhian perspectives on development. This course relates to our MA program in Sociology, Sociology of Development, and it specifically refers to the perspectives on development. Today we shall be discussing the Gandhian perspectives on development. As you know, development is an aspiration, development is a dream. Every human being look for development. Today we shall be concentrating a philosopher, a humanist, a national leader like that of Mahatma Gandhi, how he has thought of the developmental perspective specifically for India, which can be replicated in other parts of the world. Gandhian perspective is located in a particular situation in the country, and we'll be examining how he perceived a model of development for Indian population in the early part of the 20th century and how it is relevant even today. When Gandhi came back to India from South Africa in 1914, he saw Indian society very closely. By the time he saw that the self-sufficient village community system of India that was providing the backbone of Indian society, it was dependent on agriculture and cottage and household industry, and that was giving self-sufficiency of the people in terms of the production of the goods and services, distribution of the goods and services, and also consumption of the goods and services. But with the arrival of the British, the self-sufficient village community system of production, consumption of distribution, in which each category was producing, for example, agriculturist was producing the food, the potters and carpenters are producing the required tools and techniques, and the service providers, the washermen, the barber, and others, they are providing the required services. It's a village community system, a simple lifestyle that was widely followed by others. When the Britishers came, Britishers introduced a good variety of the British product to Indian country, Indian soil and Indian villages, and simultaneously British also introduced a new land arrangement, what we are knowing that the permanent land settlement of India that started in 1797. What this settlement talked about, there will be intermediaries between the landowners and the state. The intermediaries were the Jomindars, the Jotedars and others, and in the whole process layers of intermediary emerged, and what we find, the self-sufficient village community system of production, where the cultivators were the owners, simultaneously they are the producers. The cultivators become a marginalized community. Varieties of the other communities in the rural India emerged. There was nothing known. Many of the foreign travelers of India, they have documented that in India, even in late 19th century, there was nothing much presence of agricultural laborers and sharecroppers and the tenant. What they found before the departure of the British, starting from early 20th century, a huge number of agricultural laborer, landless agricultural laborer emerged in the scene. Simultaneously, there were emerged the tenants and the sharecroppers, the small and marginal cultivators, those who are dependent on the self-sufficient village community system of production gradually become an insecure social categories. Simultaneously, what happened? The village industries and cottage industries, those who are producing various tools, techniques, and other requirement of the villagers, those also got destroyed because the British product have started coming in. So what happened? Two things happened. Land system becomes segregated and the destruction of the village and cottage industries took place. So what happened? There was large displacement from the land, from the traditional occupation of carpentry, pottery, weavery, etc. like this, and what we find also gradual displacement from his own self-sufficient habitat. That produced enormous variety of discontent in the society. Those discontent are widely reflected in terms of the peasant discontent, peasant movement. We know we have seen the Santal movement, the Nil Darpan Nil movement in Bengal. Also we find the Champaran movement 1917 spearheaded by Mahatma Gandhi. Then the Khera Satyagraha, the Bardole movement took place in 1928. Also simultaneously we find large scale participation of the peasants in our civil disobedience movement. Simultaneously, there was also gradual emergence of the workers because British industry started penetrating, and British products are to be produced from Indian soil. So many industries were formed. So there were the workers also facing a lot of discontent in the society. So workers movement started taking place. You will be interested to know that first workers movement in India was represented by Mahatma Gandhi. That is the Ahmedabad workers strike. They invited Mahatma Gandhi to make a presentation, and that was the first organized workers movement in India. So that was the background, the discontent of the peasants, the workers, the small cultivators, tenants and sharecroppers were brewing in the country. So a developmental perspectives are to be thought of, that how it can be thought of, how a new India can grow on the foundation of a new developmental perspective. Mahatma Gandhi was thinking for that. Mahatma Gandhi started coming to India from Africa. He realized that India lives in the villages. India's heart lives in the villages. So it is the village economy, village society that was producing a different kind of ambience of this moral, spiritual economy. But what he was saying, he was not going only by a simple impression. Mahatma Gandhi started traveling the whole country. He started walking by foot. He started using the bullock cart, the bus and train. He traveled from one part of the country to another to know the Indian village life. So what he tried to understand, the enormous kind of interrelationship in Indian society, that is from Indian rural spiritualism, the relation to nature, culture and the self-sufficiency. A kind of an integration with the anomic spiritualism, relation to nature, relation to culture and self-sufficiency. What he talked about, what he found, that Indian economy, Indian village, Indian people can survive only founded on self-sufficiency. What he also simultaneously looked into, and he realized that despite all those distractions, the village development, the village was the cornerstone of Indian economy, polity and culture. So what he thought of, the self-sufficient development which was there in the village, that is to be rebuilt, that is to be thought of. So he started thinking of how the self-development, the village development can be the self-development, and that can get a priority of the materialistic development of India. And also he tried to make a distinction at that point of time. He made a distinction between the material progress on the one hand, also talked about the real progress on the one hand. By material progress, he thought in terms of well-being in the organization of production. But he told that is not the aim of human being. Human being real aim is the real progress. Real progress is that how the real progress to be thought of. Real progress, he thought of a kind of interrelationship between spiritualism, relation to nature, relation to culture and self-sufficiency in terms of consumption, production and distribution. Here he tried to root his developmental slogan in terms of what it called Swadeshi. That is, think in terms of indigeneity, think in terms of the real need of the people. His indigeneity was linked to the need of the people, need of the villager, need of the common people of India. So what Gandhian development perspective Gandhi thought of? Gandhi has given, if we were to summarize his developmental plan, developmental perspective, maybe we were to speak in 4 different areas. One is that what he talked, that is Swadeshi, how the Swadeshi can be formed. That is one. Number 2, that Swadeshi, after that he talked about that is education, how Swadeshi can be inculcated through the process of education. Third, he talked about in terms of Swadeshi can be promoted through indigenous culture. That is, what is that indigenous culture? Giving a lot of importance to the indigenous institution, the village panchayat, gram panchayat. He talks about employment, talks about education. He also talks about the health, how the health of the rural people can be taken care of, whole sanitation program. Then he talks about a developmental initiative that is sustaining. He has given a elaborate a program of action, that is program for development. So this 3 or 4 part of Gandhian perspective we will be discussing one after another. So first part, what he talked about, that is Swadeshi. How the Swadeshi he talked about, that is, it is that for him Swadeshi is founded on Khadi, that is our handloom, and handloom is linked to the village culture and village industries. How he tried to develop the argument is that is Swadeshi is founded on producing the cloth. That cloth that covers the body, that is the initial human need. Your body is to be covered. That your body is to be covered, that cloth is to be produced in India, then that should be produced based on the handloom, that is the khadi. And here he talked about the Swadeshi cloth, that is indigenous, internally, locally produced cloth based on charka. That is what he talked about, the khadi. So for khadi, to him, that is the production of the cloth that covers the body. It's a big symbol. That is, Swadeshi is not only a material product of producing a cloth. It is a symbol. It is a symbol of mentality, symbol of self-determination, that you can cover your body by yourself through your own labor, with the resources available in the villages, with the labor available in the villages, so you can produce the cloth to cover your body. So it is a kind of a product, it's a mentality, it's also a kind of a proud, and it's a kind of an empowerment. What he talked about, when you go for khadi, you wear the cloth, handloom cloth, and produce it by yourself. So how to feel a sense of empowerment, sense of self-sufficiency, a proud of your own identity. So what he was talking about, that is, if independence is to be acquired, if independence is to be ensured for the maximum number of the people, but rather the whole people of the country, it means that Indians should be self-sufficient in terms of to be dependent on its own production, own consumption, that is founded on khadi. So khadi also talks about not only a mentality of Swadeshi, empowerment and identity, it also talks about a process of decentralization of the production. If there is a mechanized production, there is a process of centralization. So for him, khadi is a kind of decentralized. When there is decentralization of production, decentralization of consumption or distribution, power does not remain concentrated only in the hand of limited people, those who are having control over the production process. So he was a very intelligent man. He was thinking in terms of dissemination and decentralization of the production process, so it does not remain controlled in the hand of the limited few. So what he was going further, it is a spinning wheel. That is what we call charka. What is spinning wheel? It is a sign of progress. So it is a progress of upliftment of the poor, upliftment of the villagers, the farmers. So what he was talking about, so far, with the arrival of the British, the villagers are dependent on the town to get the cloth. Here is the time the villagers will produce the cloth. Now the urbanites will come and they will compensate, and they will purchase the cloth from the villagers. So it will give more and more self-sufficient to the villagers. So by khadi, let me again summarize this part. By khadi he was talking, it's a kind of commitment to indigeneity, it's a kind of commitment to the freedom, a kind of a mentality and self-determination for the fulfillment of one's life in terms of own resources. It's also in terms of empowerment of the people, that talks of a proud identity. It's a means of uniting the Indian in terms of a common indigenous resources, and also fulfilling the basic necessities and integrating the rural-urban life together with the production of khadi, that is our indigenous production from the villages. Now let us come, that is when he was talking about the khadi, that is a symbol of the spinning wheel, charka. He was also talking about village industries and the self-sufficiency. For him, that is, charka is the center of rural development. If rural India is to be developed, it is to be founded on the charka. So any kind of developmental slogan, if it is to be anti-malaria campaign, if it is to be improvement of sanitization, settlement of the villages, etc., like this, several other endeavors, he told it is to be founded on charka. What he was putting charka at the center of everything, because it is the center of production, distribution and consumption. So when you are concentrated and interlinked with the whole process of production, distribution and consumption, other societal need in terms of anti-malaria campaign, in terms of anti-leprosy campaign, in terms of sanitation campaign, in terms of settlement of the village dispute. So it is to be founded on certain indigenous institution that I am coming little later. What kind of political and social institution he has talked about. And he also talked about, that is, those spinning machine wheel will provide the livelihood security and give employment assurance to the largest number of the village population. At that time, around more than 80% of Indian population are dependent on the land and living in the rural areas. He also simultaneously talked about, that is, a kind of a interrelationship between the village industries, and he was talking about the khadi industries. He was giving more emphasis on the khadi industries, not on the village industries. What he was talking about, it is the handloom, not the machine loom. It is the handloom production that will be empowering, and that will give a village people a sense of self-confidence and sense of empowerment, so that they can remain grounded in their own culture, own tradition, and simultaneously they can aspire for liberation and a kind of a self-sufficiency in the village. So what he was taking simultaneously, the village life is to be complete in its own way. How it is to be complete, that it should have varieties of the activities around the spinning. What is that? The hand grinding, hand pounding, soap making, paper making, turning, oil pressing, everything, all kind of activities, those are part of the local village khadi industries or the village industries. Those are to be interlinked. Keep in mind, when Mahatma Gandhi was talking about a development and self-sufficiency, his sense of self-sufficiency is linked to the well-being of human being in terms of realization of its own life, not a realization of a materialistic life. If realization of a spiritual life, he was talking about the simple life, to live in terms of need, not in terms of greed. So when you are living in terms of the basic minimum need and realizing the very purpose of your human being, very purpose of your ontology or being in the society, he was giving a lot of emphasis on this. Resources available in hand, that is, resources available in terms of land, in terms of village industry, in terms of charka, wheel machine, etc., like this. So he was talking about a life pattern which is a kind of interlinked in terms of the nature, in terms of culture, in terms of the local resources, and total spiritual and overall development of a human being. Now, what he talked about, Gandhiji also talked about in terms of when he came to India, he found on the one hand destruction of the village cottage industries that has made Indian people feel a sense of dejection from the economy, and simultaneously a lot of penetration of the foreign good to the Indian soil. So what he tried to see, what is that is, lot foreign machine has come and foreign product have also come to Indian society. So what he told, he found that is, if Indian industry, Indian economy is to be developed, it is not to be developed to be dependent on sophisticated machine. So he was never in favor of sophisticated machine. Rather, he told there should be boycotting of machine-made goods, and one should favor the handmade goods. Handmade goods are indigenous. Machine-made products are foreign. So what he was talking about, Swadeshi, in terms of developing, in terms of local resources, and that satisfied the social, economic life of the villagers, of the common man at that point of time. So what he was also simultaneously giving importance that agriculture is to be developed because people need food, but he was never in terms of wide introduction or revolutionary change in agriculture in terms of modern tools and techniques, because his thinking was that people will need self-sufficiency. People need self-sufficiency without destroying the nature. So whatsoever it is available with the mother earth, without disturbing it, we should produce. So Indian peasants required the introduction to the spinning wheel more rather than to the modern machine. So what he was trying, an organic relationship of Indian agriculture with the spinning machine, Indian agriculture with the household industry, Indian agriculture with the khadi. So what he was trying a restoration of the glory of spinning wheel that brought India a sense of glory in the past. Because India was economically one of the developed regions in the world that attracted the colonials power to come to India. So, but coming here, they have already robbed India of all the resources. So, what Mahatma Gandhi was thinking, to retaliate that power in terms of developing that capacity from within rather than to be dependent on the other. He was trying to develop a kind of a mechanism, a kind of an arrangement that will be self-empowering, self-dedicating, self-producing. So self, that is indigeneity, Swadeshi was the Mool mantra in his all developmental discourse. So that is one part. He was talking about the production process. What should be the nature of production, about agricultural production, and how khadi production, because you need some production, and also through the production you will get some employment. So a relationship between the production and employment and the organization of production was taken care of in his all Swadeshi discourse. Now come what he was talking about in terms of education, because as a human being you need education, you need employment, you need organization production, you also need education. So what he was talking about in terms of educational need, Gandhi was firmly believing on certain fundamental basic education to fulfill the basic need, and a kind of organic relationship between the body, mind and the soul. So it is not a commercial education he was talking about. He was talking about the organic relationship of the body, mind and the soul, because it is not only intellect. He was also talking about the soul. You need to purify your soul. You need to enhance your mind, but there should be organic linkage along with the body. So what he was talking about, as a foundation stone of his educational perspective, that is the language. He thought that the education must be taught in our own language rather than the English language. So until unless you know your own language, you disseminate your education on your own language, there is a gap between the teacher and the taught. There is a gap between the learner and the learned, because the way things are communicated, the way all discourses, the learning process are communicated, this is to be communicated in a very communicable language. Whereas vernacular language is the foundation in which that is to be founded. Gandhi also simultaneously gave emphasis of a national language. What is the national language? He told Hindi should be given an importance, because that will be communicating among all those communities. So we should have a national language. Simultaneously, we should also give a lot of importance on the universality of the local language. And he was not in favor of expression and emphasis on the English education or any education that is founded on the foreign languages. And his quotation is quite interesting here. He speaks, those who have received education through foreign tongue could not represent the masses because the people do not identify themselves with such person or with such language. So if you are to communicate with the foreign language, if you are to communicate with the foreigners, that's okay. But if you are communicating with the local student, if you are communicated with the Indian student, you should know the Indian language, you should communicate in their own language. So what he was giving a lot of importance on the vernacular language and also a kind of a national language. So what are the components of his education? That is in terms of language. But there are some other important component on his education. That is one important component, as I told, the organic relationship between the body, mind and the soul. By saying it, Mahatma Gandhi was giving a lot of importance on spirituality. Or to make a distinction between theology and spirituality. He was giving the spirituality of language, spirituality of understanding, that how you can liberate yourself with the materialistic desire and you can devote yourself to the service of the humankind, and that sense of liberation should emanate, should come from the educational system itself. So you should not enslave yourself with the knowledge that you have gained, rather you are liberating yourself to dedicate yourself for the cause of humanity. So when you are dedicating yourself for the cause of humanity, you are contributing to the whole process of character building. So it takes us to another stage, that is when he was talking about the organic relationship between the body, mind and soul. He is talking about the spirituality. He is also talking about a sense of liberation from from the materialistic desire. You are placing yourself to a higher kind of understanding, elevating yourself to a sense of spirituality. So by doing it, you should have the foundation of education as such that, what are as such? Number one, you are organically linking yourself in terms of body, mind and soul. You are having a spirituality and you are liberating yourself from the all dominating forces, and you are creating a platform to educate the child to come to that level. So how you will do it? Here he is talking about the need of a Naya Talim, new educational arrangement. So what is the cornerstone of his Naya Talim? That is widely talked about. Mahatma Gandhi is synonymous with Naya Talim, that is new education. What is Naya Talim he is talking about? The foundation of his Naya Talim, as I told earlier, the organic relationship between the body, mind and soul. That is, you are going to develop that organic relationship between the body, mind. Your body is not dissociated, is not disembedded from your mind, and your mind is not disembedded from your soul. What is the soul? Soul talks about your relationship with the nature, with the universe, with the fellow feeling, with the surroundings. So in that way, you will be able to link yourself through your physical existence, through your mental capability. You will liberate yourself to dedicate to the cause of humanity, to the cause of the well-being of this earth. So how it is to be done? It is to be done both by a new educational framework that will not be, site of learning will not be only the school, also the family. So he is saying the school should be an extension of the family culture. Family should also be an extension of the school. So here is a kind of organic relationship again between the school and the family, because we learn more from the neighborhood, from the surroundings, than from the technical schooling environment. So until unless there is a reinforcing mechanism with the school and the family, family and the school, perhaps that organic relationship, that kind of a body, mind and soul relationship will not grow. So what he was emphasizing, a kind of interrelationship between body, mind and soul through interrelationship between the school and the family culture. By this he was talking about there will be not only the basic learning. Basic learning is important. That is, people should learn the 3R: reading, writing and comprehension. That is important. Reading, writing, calculation and comprehension, quite important. Simultaneously, he was also giving a lot of emphasis on learning the craft, learning craft through the education. So what he is giving the importance, because the earlier economy, when he was talking about the local craft, local culture. So what is important, that part also be linked, because art craft is a part of your nature, part of your culture, part of universality. So that is to be made part of your education, and that is to be linked to your family and also linked to your educational arrangement, and by doing it you will be serving the economy, you will be serving the society. So what kind of craft learning should be there? He is talking about that is learning craft is the center of the teaching program. So it is not only reading and writing, also learning the craft. What are those craft? That is everyday requirement of the life that we need. We need the clothes, so we would be knowing lot of spinning. So spinning should be part of educational arrangement. There should be weaving. We should know how to weave cloth. There should be leather work. We should know how to make shoes, how to repair shoes, how to make pottery, what is the metal work. So how to make basket, how to make book binding. So other kind of a thing. What he was giving a lot of emphasis in terms of skill development. So it is not only you are liberating your faculty through an organic relationship between the body, mind and soul. What you are also trying to do, you are trying to come to the fulfilling, sufficing the practical need of the people, becoming part of spinning, the weaving, the leather work, the pottery, the metal work, the basket making, the book binding, each and every activities, those which are required, you are becoming part of that. So what is he is talking about? Learning is to be integrated with everyday requirement, along with the requirement of liberation of your soul from your body and mind with an integration. Here, the next phase he talks about the learning is a lifelong process. It is not that only up to certain stage of life you learn. In traditional Indian culture, we are having a certain ashram of the life. What is this ashrama? We are having brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha and sannyas. It is widely talked about in traditional Indian spiritualism and spiritual culture that up to certain stage of life, people will engage themselves with the learning process at the stage of brahmacharya. So what he is talking about, your learning process should not be only concentrated during the stage of brahmacharya. So you have to go beyond that. What is that? It should be a lifelong process. Here he gives a lot of importance on adult education. Maybe when Gandhiji was thinking, and till now we think in a huge way, in our country, till now we are having around 25% of the population, those who are illiterate. 75% people are literate. By saying so, people, those who can read and write. Let us come to that point. How many percentage of our people go to the higher education? It is only 26 or 27% of the population can go to the higher education. But the bulk of the people has still remained illiterate or semi-literate. What Mahatma Gandhi was emphasizing, need of adult education. So need of adult education, that adult people, their needs are to be looked into, they have to be given education. And he is simultaneously talking about that adult education should not be divorced from earlier kind of educational paradigm or educational perspective. What is talking about organic relationship between the body, mind and soul, interrelationship between the family and the school institution, and also interrelationship between the our school curriculum along with our other teaching program of craft and other kind of skill development activities. Those are interlinked. So what we are finding, a kind of a holistic development in his Naya Talim, Mahatma Gandhi has thought of and talked about. So by saying so, Mahatma Gandhi also make a distinction between the materialism and the progress. Because when we are talking about education, education for what? Usually in the modern term, by education we mean a kind of a knowledge package that is certified by certain educational institution or certain bodies, and those certificate education is a kind of a commodity. Because education is a commodity, based on commodity you purchase another commodity. But education is a kind of a certification. Through that certification you purchase another kind of commodity. That is, you become capable, you declare yourself capable. Somebody declares yourself capable to be worth of the knowledge you have acquired, and accordingly somebody enters into the job and employment market. So knowledge is a kind of commodification process, but Mahatma Gandhi was talking about knowledge from a different perspective that will push everybody not towards the materialistic world but towards the path of progress. What he's talking about, he was against the materialistic progress and materialistic development of the society. And to quote him, if I exactly remember what he's talking about, so far as we have made the modern materialistic craze as our goal, if we have made the modern materialistic goal as our craze, perhaps we are going downhill in the path of our progress. So he's talking about our path of progress is not the materialistic. Our path of progress is not materialistic. That is a spiritual development, developing an organic relationship between the body, mind and soul. So here he's deviating, he's dissociating himself from the materialistic path. He's talking in terms of a spiritual path. Then he talks about if the people who make the pursuit of wealth as their aim of life, if the people make the pursuit of wealth is their only aim of their life, perhaps we are again making a downhill journey. So it is not pursuit of wealth, it is not pursuit of materialistic well-being. What is the pursuit? It's pursuit of spiritual and a kind of an integrative relationship between the nature, culture and human being. So here he was talking about, when we are talking about not as much with the materialism, we are talking about the human progress, perhaps we are mostly talking about in terms of equality. Mahatma Gandhi was dead against inequality between the capital and the labor. So what he was talking about, the conflict between the capital and labor is to be eliminated from the society. So there is a kind of a coexistence between all varieties of the laborer, all varieties of the workers, all varieties of the human being within the ecosystem of nature, culture and soul living together. So what he is talking about, if that thing, a kind of a non-conflicting relationship to be developed between the capital and the labor, there is to be a kind of a social trusteeship. Social trusteeship means it is the industrialist, they will take care of the need, the rich will take care of the need of the poor, that is the have-nots, so that they can also contribute to develop an organic relationship between the soul, body and mind. Ultimately, it is the human development, it is the integrated development between the soul, body and mind. So what he is widely talking about, that is all kind of development, that is social trusteeship, value for the labor, and also the progress, the way we were talking about the non-materialistic progress, everything to be ingrained and linked to the educational process. Until unless it is made part of the educational process, it will not be reproduced, it will not be sustaining. So he was talking about a sustainable society, a sustainable educational perspective in which human being will grow not in terms of its materialistic development, rather in terms of an integrated development, a harmonious relationship between nature, culture and human being, integrated relationship between the body, mind and soul. So again we come back to his whole argument, that is the Swadeshi, that is Charkha is found in Swadeshi, but let us talk it further because it is a development. It is a development. By Swadeshi, what he talked about, Swadeshi he means in the self-governance. That is, it is not only the production, you also will have the self-governance. You should have self-reliance. You should have a sense of self-employment, particularly those who are living in the villages. So Swadeshi is not only in terms of Charkha, the production, Swadeshi also in terms of you are governing yourself. You are also self-reliant, you are self-employed, and particularly you are self-employed, remaining self-employed in the ambience where you are living in a village culture. So he was not in terms of ruthless process of urbanization, modernization and industrialization. Rather, he was speaking in favor of sustaining a rural community system, sustaining a village culture where everybody will remain self-governance, will be self-governed, will remain self-reliant, will be self-employed, and will be looking for a world that is self-fulfilling. Now, how it will be looked into? He's talking about not that the villagers will not have the relationship with the wider world. They will have the relationship with the wider world. The economic and political power will lie in the hand of the village assembly of the villagers. The villagers will decide their way of life. The villagers will decide their need and the ways and means to satisfy those needs. So what he was talking about, a kind of a economic and political power remain concentrated in the hand of the villager. So what he was talking about in terms of domain of politics, he was talking about that is self-governance through certain indigenous institution. Here he gave a lot of emphasis on the village community, village assemblies, what we know nowadays that a village panchayat system. So he was giving a lot of emphasis on the self-governance, self-reliance and self-employment in terms of reinstating the institution of village panchayat, village assemblies, those who lost its relevance during the British period. So he was talking about an arrangement. That arrangement is to be reinforced by reinforcing the indigenous institutional arrangement within the village culture. Here what he was talking about, that is, it is in the domain of economic and Swadeshi, he was speaking, obviously he was speaking only those things those were produced indigenously. But simultaneously he also talked about, that is, there is poverty in the village. There is also ignorance in the village. There is also so many other problems in the village. So those problems are to be addressed. Those problems are to be addressed by making the people more and more self-reliant. When people becoming self-reliant, he was not talking about the one section and the other, the rich and the poor, upper caste and the lower caste, one religious community, another religious community. He is talking about the self-reliance of the each and every section of the people. So for him, it is the last man in the queue, the last man in the line. If you can look into the last man in the line, how the last man in the line will be self-governed, will be self-reliant, and will be self-employed, perhaps the majority of the problem which we are looking in the contemporary world, that will be taken care of. So here Gandhi gave a lot of emphasis of village panchayat. Why? The village was having a lot of problems. What are those problems? It is having the problems of ignorance, as I told, the illiteracy, lack of sanitation in the village. So lack of discipline in the village. So what he was trying to give a lot of emphasis on the indigenous institution, that is the village panchayat. He went to the extent of saying that the problem of the village sanitation and other would have been resolved long ago, and the village panchayat would have been a living force suited to the requirement of self-government. So what is talking about, the village panchayat which has lost its glory, that should be placed at the center of all development, all activities, the political mobilization, the economic mobilization, the social mobilization, all problems starting from health, education, everything. He wants that a community life, and that is founded on an ideal organization, that is the village panchayat. So Mahatma Gandhi, when he was talking about all these three important dimensions, that is, he talked about the self-reliance in terms of charkha. He talks about education in terms of Naya Talim. He also talked about a kind of growing relationship rather reinforcing relationship between the nature, culture, and human being. He also talked about certain constructive program. His constructive program is widely came out in 1942 because Gandhian perspective on development will be halfway through until unless we discuss the constructive program which Gandhi widely talked about. Gandhiji widely talked about certain issues, those are to be addressed immediately, and those have remained part of his constructive program. In his constructive program, he has identified 18 major tasks to be taken care of. When Gandhiji came to India in 1914, by that time, a kind of a ethnic or communal politics has started to brewing in Indian subcontinent, and lot of ethnic, caste-based and communal disharmony was growing in many parts of the country. And by the time Indian Muslim League was formed, so many caste groups are also formed, and a kind of a social disharmony is growing, and there is a need that a kind of unity is to be formed, is to be ascertained. So in his constructive program, Mahatma Gandhi put his #1 agenda, that is a communal unity. He told that no part of the country can be developed without assuring a communal unity and communal safety for each and every segment of the population. A second part of his thought, he talked about the removal of untouchability. He widely talked about from this part, India, untouchability is a curse that is to be removed. He also talked about the prohibition, that is selling of liquor, that is to be totally banned in the country, and that was one part. And he talked simultaneously, #4 point, he talked about that is promotion of khadi and other village industries. So those are to be promoted as a part of his constructive program. He widely talked about the village sanitation, that is our village sanitation is to be improved. His 5th program was the new basic education, his Naya Talim is to be initiated so that people become self-reliant, self-governed and also self-employed. Simultaneously, his 8th point was the adult education. Then he talked about development of women in society. His 9th point of his constructive program was his education, health and hygiene, that is to be promoted. Then he talked about promotion of the provincial language. He also talked about promotion of a national language, that is the 10th and 11th. The 12th program he talked about, along with economic growth and economic development, we need a kind of economic equality, a kind of a balanced relationship between the labor and capital. So his emphasis was on the economic equality. He talked about specifically certain categories of the society, those are to be taken special care of. He talked about the Kisan, those who are the food producers of the country, special care is to be taken. Then he talked about the labor class, their interest is to be taken care of. He talked about the well-being of the Adivasis, the scheduled caste and the indigenous people. He talked about the lepers, that is again a curse on the society. They face the problem of again untouchability and avoidance and social distance, so that is to be addressed. He also talked about the student, that is a special category, their needs are to be looked into, and all are to be looked into and promoted by means of discipline, collective mobilization. That collective mobilization, what is talking about, a culture of civil disobedience is to be promoted in the country. So what he was talking about, a space to be created within the democratic culture where everybody will get an opportunity to give their dissent through civil disobedience. So let us go to this point one by one, how he was talking about when he was talking about this constructive program. For him, constructive program is the foundation stone of Purna Swaraj, that is accomplished independence, and that Purna Swaraj to him can be achieved only by fulfilling all those 18 program of action he has talked about, and those 18 programs of to be attained, what he's talking about, by being truthful to it, also through non-violence means. And when he was talking about the communal unity, number 1 point was there, he was talking about everybody is agreed about the necessity of this unity, but not everybody is willing to maintain that unity. So what he is talking about, a political culture is to be created so that a communal harmony can be created, can be ensured in the society. And if communal unity is not maintained, it means that the breakability of the heart remains in our society. By communal unity, he was going to the extent by saying that it is the unification of the heart. The unification of the heart of several communities, major religious communities, major linguistic communities, major caste groups are to be together, so that the winning of the heart is the major activities, and that is to be taken care of by each and every community members, those who are living in this country. Then second, he widely talked about removal of untouchability. Mahatma Gandhi widely thought of and widely talked about removal of untouchability. And as you know that Harijan is the term was coined by Mahatma Gandhi, and he dedicated his life for the well-being and upliftment of the Harijan, and he widely accepted the fact that is Harijan, the practice of untouchability is a curse in Indian society, and that curse is to be eliminated from Indian society by undertaking certain constructive work. What are those constructive work? He talked about that dedicate yourself to the humanity, dedicate yourself to unite the heart, and dedicate yourself to be self-reliant, to be self-governed, and to remain self-elevated. So here is the phenomenon he's talking about, both for communal unity and also unity among the caste group by eliminating the practice of untouchability from Indian society. He talked about the whole prohibition, that is how the prohibition is to be eliminated from the Indian society. He talked about that specifically the prohibition is to be eliminated with the involvement of women and the student in this movement. His emphasis is that who are the immediate victims of prohibition, who are the immediate victims of a drunkard husband? It is the women and the children. And perhaps they should resist first. It is the women, the children, and the students should resist first. The voice should come from that backdrop, so that total prohibition take place across the country. That was his third important point he's talked about. Then he talked about the sanitation. He talked about, though there has been varieties of the development in India, but village sanitation has been one of the areas of big neglect of Indian polity and Indian state. And here he was talking about, if you visit even the local hamlet, you will find the scattered dung heaps and scattered illness each and every hamlets of the villages, and those are to be taken care of by introducing a social development program that will ensure basic activities of sanitation in the society, need of sanitation of the people in the society. Then he talked about the woman. I mean, that is quite important, that Mahatma Gandhi always encouraged women's participation in collective mobilization, and he specifically encouraged women's participation in the independent movements, especially their participation in the Satyagraha. And for him, that women are the real flag bearer of equality in the society, real flag bearer of Swaraj in the country. And his famous quote, when he talks about that is why the whole notion of empowerment should start from the woman. his point is that women in Indian society are called the abala, that is non-empowered, disempowered category. Women in our society, whom we call abala, once become shabala, that is empowered. All those who are non-empowered, they become empowered in the society. So whole process of empowerment, a process of consensitization, which we are talking about, that should start from empowerment of women in the society. That is, Abala empowerment is the empowerment of the family, is the empowerment of the community, is the empowerment of the society, is the empowerment of the nation. So his enormous emphasis has always been empowerment of women in the society. His other important part has been, as I told earlier, the health and hygiene. That is, the health and hygiene, perhaps majority of the problems related to health will be taken care of, is the health and sanitation and hygiene issues are taken care of from the village and the other remote areas of the country. His equal emphasis was for the provincial language, as I told earlier. Similar, his emphasis was for a national language. For a national language, he talked about this language indisputably is Hindi. Why he is talking about that? That is, majority of the Indian people speaking in Hindi, so that is to be used a national language. Simultaneously, keep in mind, he has not ignored the provincial language. He told that all the provincial language should be inculcated, should be developed, so that our indigeneity, our Swadeshi, our own kind of culture, own kind of linkage between our culture, nature and environment remain grounded in our society. If that is not, our development is going to be disastrous. That is the result would be disastrous if the provincial language is not promoted for the development of Swadeshi in our country. He talked about equality, the promote equality. He also talked about the development of the Kishan. He talked about always, because when Mahatma Gandhi was writing as visiting in 1942, even that time, around 80% people are dependent on agriculture. Kishan are the most exploited social categories at that point of time. So Mahatma Gandhi was always ensuring that is interest of the Kishan should be ensured, and it is quite important that in 1946, so when he wrote this constructive program in 1946, a national commission on agriculture and national commission for land reform was already formed by the freedom fighters, and they propagated that what kind of land reform India should adopt immediately after the independence. So the kind of Kishan movement, kind of peasant movement that was proliferating in various parts of the country, that can be addressed. So his heart has always remained with the villagers, heart has remained only with the Kishan. Similarly, he talked about the labor, and so problem of the laborers, they should not be only a cog in the machine, they are also a human being, so their issues are to be addressed. And laborers, he dedicated his life for the upliftment of the laborers. Similarly, he has widely talked about the whole kind of empowerment of the student communities. Now, we have seen the Gandhian perspective of development. He has tried to locate a kind of organic relationship between the nature, culture and human being. That organic relationship also linked in terms of the linkage between human body, mind and soul, that is reflected in terms of Swadeshi, in terms of Naya Talim, new education, and in terms of his constructive program he talked in 1942. But what is important is that today we stand in the threshold of another century, that is we are in 21st century, 2020. We are having several developmental perspectives. The developmental perspective, it has also widely shifted from growth-oriented development. We have talked about the development only in terms of growth, that is gross domestic product. In terms of modernization, industrialization, urbanization, that has widely destroyed our ecosystem, our interrelationship between the nature, culture and human being. And now we talk about in terms of human development, development as freedom, development and choice. We are also talking about the inclusive development. What is important today is that as Mahatma Gandhi started with that, if development is to be sustaining, development is to be human oriented, and development should be in terms of the basic need. And his main mantra of development is that, and was that, and is that Mother Earth is having everything to satisfy your need, but Mother Earth is not having much to satisfy your greed. So what is important is that Mahatma Gandhi was always trying for a developmental perspective that will satiate, that will satisfy human need, not the human greed. Because he was trying to, along with the development perspective, he was trying to transform human being from a physical soul to a intellectual soul, ultimately to a liberated spiritual soul. And a liberated spiritual soul can think in terms of satisfying development only in terms of need, not in terms of greed. Thank you very much for being with us and for listening to this lecture. Should you have any question, you can write me. I'll be happy to answer all of your questions. Thank you.